Glad to
Uh,
hear it's
well,
thriving, man.
thanks for talking. We're going to jump in like I'm on the radio and just tell everyone that my guest is Julian Lage. She's a jazz guitarist that was born in Santa Rosa, California, born and raised. And
That's right.
we're very proud of you here in Santa Rosa. Julian has just released his fourth album on Blue Note Records. It's called Speak to Me, and it's really a great record, Julian. Congratulations.
Thank you, dog. Thank you. Thanks so much. I mean, when we talk about records, I think of your shop. I think of growing up in Santa Rosa and collecting albums and learning from them and being a student of them. So this is quite surreal and lovely to be speaking with you about this latest project.
Now, I want to talk about the new album because something that is pretty unique, I believe, as far as your albums go, is that you're working with Joe Henry as your producer.
That's
First,
right. That's with first time Joe Henry is someone I've been a fan of for years, as a producer and also a singer and a songwriter and a guitar player. And he's done a lot of albums that have really touched me. And um, long before I knew him. Then about a year or two ago, we did a project in New York. It was a tribute to Bob Dylan that Joe and T-Bone Burnett were producing. And I played with Margaret Glaspie and Bill Frisell as a trio as part of this bigger production. And it was fabulous. And that was the first time I kind of was around Joe in a sense where I thought, man, I like the way this guy works. And I feel like myself, in his presence. I feel really comfortable. So in making this album, this one we're speaking about today, I wanted to be pushed. I wanted to go into territory um, with other instruments, without feeling the pressure of writing and big arrangements and orchestration. And I thought if there's one person who can bring something like this together, it's Joe Henry. And it's exactly what happened. I presented the music to him. I presented my insecurities to him. And he said, listen, I know just the cats. You get your trio, which is the core of it. And then he brought in Patrick Warren on keyboards, who's more from Tom Waits's world and Dylan's world and a lot of film and television music. And Levon Henry, great woodwind player and similar to Patrick in terms of atmospheric sound. And then Chris Davis, who plays prepared piano. And so he helped us configure this new ensemble. And without him, that wouldn't have come together, frankly.
one thing I really love about the new album is that it feels like just right from the very first track. It's so beautiful, and it seems like it's like you're going on a little like a road trip with Julian. Like, come, here's where we're going, and it kind of makes this big swooping journey, musical journey, and then brings you back home at the end. It really is a great record. And
Thank you.
how
Thank
did
you, Doug.
how did it? Do you feel that way too?
I feel that way too. It's cool to hear you say it though, because I think I felt that all along, but I never articulated it as well as you, which is that from one perspective, this record has a lot of variety
Yeah.
because I'm playing acoustic a lot, I'm playing electric a lot, there's different instruments. And so I've always been kind of dazzled by that, but really to me it's one big journey. It is one big storyline. So if you were to hear all the music on just one guitar, for example, you would hear probably the connective tissue even more. We're actively trying to pull the ear into these different areas, but it is a road trip and it is a narrative and it does have a beginning and a middle and an end. And so, and I love how those things can reveal themselves, right? I don't think that's in our capacity to we'll say, okay, well, you can't know what someone's going to feel from a record. It's none of our business actually. You make it, you do what you can, and then you present it, and people can project their feelings onto. But I've noticed with this so far that a lot of those close to me, and even those, new friends of mine, they're getting a similar hit, which is like, yeah, there's this kind of trail. Um, and yet it doesn't feel scattered. It doesn't feel like, oh, that doesn't seem like it fits the record. So um, I'm just kind of relieved that you feel that way too, because I certainly do. I certainly do.
There's a lot. We get a ton of albums sent to the radio station. Promos and new artists putting stuff out, and I get a fair amount of jazz albums and just all kinds of Americana albums and stuff. And I hate
Yeah.
say this about the business, but sometimes you run out of time, so you'll get a new album by some quartet, and you listen
Yeah.
to a little bit of the first track and get a little bit in the next track, and you kind of skip,
Yeah.
and they all kind of sound the same. It's like, okay, well, I get the idea of this one. So if I do want to play a track off it, I'll just play one that's 4 minutes long. But what I really love is the things that are mixed up, and uh,
Yeah.
the other musicians you have playing on it that Joe brought in, they're not overpowering. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes it'll just be like, what was
You
that?
dig that?
A little
Man, Doug, you nailed it. That blows me away. There's we were talking yesterday about this something similar to this at rehearsal. This was just yesterday, but the difference between a musician playing less versus leaving space. They're
Mm,
two different concepts. And I think often in jazz, especially when you're coming up learning it and you have jazz bands, you're told so many times to like, leave space, play, like, do what you did, but 30% less. It's always kind of subtractive.
mhm.
But that's not the same as saying, hey, I want you to use every tool you've got. And I want to make sure the most prominent one is the use of space and environment. And that's what I hear with the musicians on this record, where they are utilizing space. They're saying, I choose to have this thing so that when I do come in with a little moment of cellos or bass marimba or mellotron or whatever the sound is, that has the most impact. So it's really a study of impact, and I think you can't talk about impact unless you talk about space. And I learned that lesson from making this record with these cats is that they just eat and breathe that kind of concept, you know.
Who has produced your
So it's
previous album?
really quite. Say that again.
Who has produced your previous albums? Self-produced
The
or?
last two, well, Margaret Glaspie has, my partner in crime. I mean, Margaret and I have been making music together for 15 years in one way or another. And that was View with the Room and The Layers. That was the last two records we did. And that was my trio plus Frizzell. And it was just a completely different conception. It's kind of about how do you augment the quartet, but keep it feeling kind of small, like you'd hear it in a jazz club. And then the jump to this record is like, well, what if you took down the walls of the club and you were in a bigger atmosphere? And her and Joe have worked together, so it's kind of a beautiful handoff in a way.
Yeah. What now are you just starting the tour for the new
Yeah.
Speak to Me
We
tour?
we start we start in the next couple of weeks, in the middle of March we start, and it'll be predominantly East Coast, through down to the South just a little bit. And we'll be doing our best to present a lot. We'll go out as a quintet rather than a trio. So we'll have keyboards and sax and woodwinds represented. Um, with the trio at the core. I'm excited. I'm frankly, man, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, you make a record and God willing, you get to play it live and you're a different person by that time. So this record is already almost a year old and the songs have evolved and they've changed and I've added more. So
Is it
anyway, I'm very excited about.
is it mainly the
Say
new
that
album?
again.
Is it mainly the new album you'll be playing on the tour?
Absolutely. The record will run through the whole set, but it'll be interspersed with some other things that we like to access and maybe some trio stuff and some solo moments um but kind of per our conversation, Doug, it's fascinating to me how you can give the sense of drama and surprise uh that you get from a record. But how do you do that live? If part of the beauty of a record is you can't see us. So you're looking straight ahead, and then all of a sudden something comes out of your left speaker, and you go, "Oh, I didn't see that." But when you're all sitting up there, how do you give that same drama? Is kind of the question at play. So with full humility, I look forward to this.
Now, has the return of vinyl affected the length of your albums? I mean, you
Well,
put out a CD, you got 75 minutes or so that you can
yeah,
fill it up. But I know a lot of people used to think like, man, let's just put on 20 songs. So,
yeah,
you have like 18, 19 minutes per side on an album. So are
right,
you
right,
thinking
right,
more
right.
economically when you produce?
Without a doubt, it's so funny you mentioned that because I even years ago, just conceptually, I've always loved 35-minute records, 40-minute records at the most. And as I can only imagine is the case in other genres. With jazz, there was a big movement with CDs, just like you said, of well, we've got the room, let's fill it. We got 80 minutes of music, let's 75 minutes, let's put it in there. And often, it could be great, but it also could be just a lot. It kind of becomes a different artifact, I guess, at that point. It's a document rather than a presentation, maybe. A concise presentation, I should say. So I've always gone for shorter, and that coincided with this boom in vinyl because we were making records that fit, and you could master them and we didn't have to take any songs off. This particular record is a double vinyl because it did go long. It's a 60-minute record, and I was so excited. First I was terrified, and then I was excited. I was terrified thinking, oh no, we can't cut it because it's so good, but now it's gonna blow our whole vinyl thing, and that's what I cherish. And then lo and behold, Blue Note very graciously said, no, we'll do it as a double vinyl. So that's kind of a new fun experience for me, I should say.
You
But yeah,
know,
the format really matters.
what I have found with the vinyl too is that initially I thought that like, oh, people aren't going to want to flip their records three times. Yeah, oh, I got two more
Totally.
sides of Julian's album. I got to listen to. But what I
Yeah,
found is that people that love the vinyl, they love the flipping. They love to
they
get
love the flipping.
hands on it. And when you got is your vinyl in color? Is it a clear vinyl or a color vinyl or something?
We have one that's in color, our special edition, and the other ones are black. But the color ones, man, you flip them and they're just beautiful. You want to touch them.
I know.
I couldn't be more with you. I think it's fun. There's something irrational about it that I think is so necessary. It is whimsical, it is art, it is about imagination. And I think the format of vinyl invites that. It invites me at least to sit still. And I think this record invites the listener to kind of enter a few different realms over the course of an hour. So it's the whole convergence feels very natural, very native, very native.
There's so many albums that when it gets to like the end of side one, if the pacing of the album is correct, you'll sit there for a minute and kind of bask in that a little bit before you get
You're
up
so
to
right.
number two. And that's why I even think about like when you're putting together a record, like how the pacing is of it and what's the last song on side one and how it
Oh,
sounds.
absolutely, Doug. I mean, that's essential. Even if you're not dealing with vinyl, it's like I think of side A and side B always for well, even if you are going to put out a CD or a download, because there is just I think a human rhythm to like after let's say 18 minutes, 19 minutes, just kind of needing a needing a moment, and where do you leave the ear? Where do you leave the ear? How do you leave the ear so it wants more? I guess that's the real question.
So, Julian Lage, I love the new record and everything, but I got to ask you a little bit about your, we knew each other when you were a kid, and your dad would bring in your dad would actually bring you to the shop after your lessons sometimes, and he'd hang in the shop while you were getting your lesson. And
Yeah.
you have brothers and sisters, right? What was
I have three sisters and a brother.
what was the uh, what was the household like at the Lodge house? With music going all the time?
Oh,
Was it artsy
yeah.
environment? What was it like growing
Absolutely.
up?
Oh my God. It was tremendous. I'm the baby of the family. So we have three older sisters and a brother. And my father's a visual artist as well. And growing up as a young man, also later on. And my mother, brilliant artist and designer, and just, I mean, truly a resonant household of just kind of creative energy. Now, even though I was focused on guitar, my sisters were deeply into academics or into sports or into whatever it is. My brother is a designer. Um, and my grandparents lived with us too on my mother's side. We had a lot of animals. So looking back, it was this kind of it's just kind of a wild scene where everybody had their thing. Everybody had their thing. Everyone was really focused, very supportive of one another. Um, and I just count my blessings though every day because it really like you would see me and my dad going around like we would do that and then come home to my siblings and that what else was going on in the family. So I was a slice of the pie. And I felt so lucky that there was so much support around it. And I think inherently and fundamentally such a love for art and the power of it in the world and the importance of it and the vitality of it. That was always on full display. I never felt anything but nurturing and support. And I don't take that for granted because I know that's not the given for everybody. That for some of you, for many, you have to kind of sneak away and do your thing because maybe your folks don't get it or whatnot. That wasn't the case
Yeah.
with me. I think music was a way of, if anything, being closer to my family.
What was it about the guitar that grabbed you?
Well, I was the fact that my dad started playing at the kind of the same time I did, so it was really an excuse to play with him. I do believe that that was the driving force. It was like he likes it, I like it, and I like it, it's independently, but there's nothing like sharing in it, with a loved one. And I think it's just a fabulous machine, and it's a very one of the things that I think is really cool about the guitar is that it's kind of a thread that runs through culture. So as you see inventions with you see, okay, guitar goes from acoustic to electric, or in a jazz band, you go from banjo to tenor guitar, or, Dylan goes electric. Anytime there are these kind of moments in the guitar history where things pivot or change, they tend to coincide with other revolutions, at least in the country, if not the world. And so the lens of the guitar is really the lens of history. And so I feel like I like how the guitar can connect me to the world in that way, and I can learn about the world through the instrument. Not even just talking about the music. Um, so it's a very special universal instrument, I think.
Yeah. What about jazz? You're pretty unusual for a young kid, 10 or 12 to come in and buy a Thelonious Monk album, for example.
Yeah. You were my source, man. You were so
What
great that you.
what
Yeah, I mean, I was
you to
obsessed.
jazz? And did you also like rock? I mean, would you play like Smoke on the Water in your room, or was it
No,
metal?
no, I knew
Just
nothing about
jazz?
rock. I still know nothing about rock. I like blues guitar and I like jazz, and classical music. That's what I was obsessed with. And within that, there was a period of when I started playing with David Grisman as a young person in the Bay Area, uh, where I absolutely got into bluegrass and old time fiddle music and dog music and that. But no, I was a bona fide nerd. I still am, was. I still very much am. I mean, I just pore over these records and I study them and I can't believe they exist. Uh, and so, and it was never because I didn't love rock or I just wasn't on my radar. It just really wasn't. I was lucky to be around. Um, in Sonoma County, such a rich jazz scene, truly. I mean, there were, at the top of the mountain to me was studying with Randy Vincent, who's such a treasure, and playing gigs with him and with George Marsh and with Chris Pimentel and Robert Jones and all these people who I knew. And then someone like Michael Barkley, who was so supportive and lovely. And that was a connection to the blues world. And it goes on and on. I mean, there was just, as my father and I used to talk about, it was really a tapestry of creative, special, loving people. And all those people had this kind of bias towards the music that I was digging on, So, and, the closest I got to the rock world was through Steve Kimmock, who I studied with, who was such a influential part of my life. But that was more the jam world, I'd say, an improvised world than rock and roll. So, yeah, it was unusual. But you know what, man? I think because it was unusual, I liked it more. I think if everybody played jazz, I might have felt like, well, that's covered or something. So, like a true kid, I was just kind of looking to find my thing.
Do you play any
And
other
I still
instruments besides guitar? Do you play
I
keyboard?
do not. No, I don't. I don't. I've tried over the years and I've studied piano and I studied different instruments in college but but I don't they don't make too much sense to me and I'm okay being ignorant with those instruments.
How are you able to communicate to other people that play other instruments, not being versed in it yourself?
Great question. God, that's a great question that I wish was just discussed more. Um, I, you know, I have an understanding of how instruments operate fundamentally in the bands I play in, which is mostly trio, so bass and drums. And the bass is kind of, though it's not a guitar, we're part of the string family.
Hmm.
So there is a sympathetic understanding of each other's kind of relationship to sound production. You pluck a string, it makes a sound.
Mhm.
And then with drums, I think of the guitar very much as a percussion instrument too. It's about phrasing and syncopation and articulation, all of those things. So in my experience, if an ensemble, regardless of their instruments, is viewing the overall sound similarly, in other words, they understand that the goal is to make a collective beauty, then you can speak in those terms and each player will figure out the translation for their instrument. So I don't need to say, hey, can you stop doing the hi-hat? I can say, let's change the tempo and let's go for this. And they go, oh, and there goes the hi-hat. So I think it's there's a bit of sleight of hand involved when you're directing an ensemble.
Yeah. Now, the new album, which is called "Speak to Me," did are all the songs original on that?
They are, yeah.
Now, when you got together with Joe Henry in the studio, did he have? Was it like here are my songs on this album? Was it already kind of fleshed out?
In a,
Did he help
well, in a
you
way,
with them, or
it's, a mix of both, I'd say. When Joe agreed to do it, we were probably 3 months out, 2.5 months out from the date, the record date. That was booked. And then it was like, oh, what are we going to do at the record session? And so at that point, I had a file of songs, demos just on the guitar, and I sent them to Joe, and I kept basically what I was looking to do was to write more than we needed for the album. If you think just conservatively, it's nice to have 12 songs for a record. I probably wrote 35, 40, somewhere in that range. And I'd write these songs and the question was, it's always, well, is it good or is it not? But it's kind of like I think there's another inquiry at play at that stage, or there was at least in this record, which is what themes are emerging? What's emerging? So I would write these tunes and say, wow, I've got six blueses now. Like I think blues is going to be a part of this record. We don't need six blueses, but good to know. Or okay, there were a lot of songs that kind of emerged that I frankly thought were unfinished and maybe not ready. Um, a song like Omission from the record is one like that, where I thought, oh, it's just a theme. There's not enough. And I would show that to Joe in the weeks leading up, and he'd say, "I beg to differ. There's plenty there. And what he was so good at keeping in mind was that the weight of responsibility didn't solely lie on what my part was. So I could write a smaller piece of music, but leave room for keyboards, piano, woodwinds. And all of a sudden, it became something far greater than just my own contribution, which was the point. So by the time we got to the session, we had distilled those 30 some tunes to about, let's say, 15. And then with each song, I would in the studio, I'd play it, we'd think about it and go, yeah, let's go. Let's go. Or, and there's some tunes, there's a song called Hymnal, which starts the record, which was always so important to the album, and I was so excited about it, and I completely forgot to record it. We completely forgot. And then we were going in for a third day just to like basically pack up the cables and the gear. And I woke up that morning, I said, wrote to Joe and I said, I just spaced, man. And he said, oh my God, we all did. And so we ran in and plugged everything back in, played it, and that's how the record starts now is
it's
that
a
song.
beautiful
So
introduction to the album. It's a great
thank
introduction,
you.
and it's
Thank
funny
you.
that you left it off and forgot about it. But I'm glad that you remembered it because it really
I'm
does.
glad I remembered too. I'm glad you remembered too.
It's like a fan. It doesn't sound like a fanfare, but it acts as a fanfare to me.
Oh, I love that you say that because I that's the word I use about it. My favorite. What's the Monk record? I forget. Well, the one where he starts with "Abide by Me" or "Abide with Me," the old gospel tune, and the horns play this beautifully. It's not long, and then it's like a gospel refrain. And a lot of the music on this record are kind of refrains more than anything. They're just kind of they ask these questions, they linger in the air, but they're not declarative. They're not saying, "Hey, man, this is the point, and here's the chorus." They're pretty, they're gentle. That one hymnal being probably the most satisfying in terms of how much music comes from so little actual writing. It's a refrain. And it's a fanfare. That's precisely the term I would have used for it
It's
in
awesome.
writing it. So I'm glad you dig
Let me ask you something about being on Blue Note Records and
it.
in my opinion, what Don Was has done to really resurrect and I don't know if that's the proper word, but to pay tribute to this great label and having you be part of the Blue Note family. What does that mean to you?
Oh man, it's an honor. I mean, Blue Note for me is for all of us, it's got a weight and it's got a history that's so profound and very much unparalleled, and whether I'm on Blue Note or not doesn't change that. I just love it. I just love that label. And Don being at the helm is profound because he not only is a brilliant musician in his own right and a producer and just a force of nature musically, um, but I think he celebrates the feature of Blue Note that is really at the center, which is that Blue Note historically has always supported innovation. Now we look back and go, wow, this is the golden era of jazz, and these records are classics and they're in the DNA of our culture. And but at the time, and for I would say, and it's still they're ahead of their time. They're showing what's possible. They're not old fashioned. They're modern. They everything is modern. Everything is um, alive and awake. And so I think Don looks for those qualities in any music he's a part of. Um, and he's helped me see the vitality of my own music, because I'll go into it think, oh well, I think it's good because it's referencing this thing from the 60s. And he'll be like, no, it's good because it's modern and it's you doing your thing. And I go, oh yeah, that's right. So he's inspiring to work with. He's inspiring to work with, and there's no fear. There's no like, oh God, I've got to live up to the Blue Note. It's not, it's almost feels like a culture of makers. It's like I feel there's something kind of inherently punk rock about the way Don runs Blue Note, and it's so exhilarating. Nothing's stuffy. It's all, as he talks about, it's all left turns. You just keep making left turns and see where you go. So
Oh,
I feel very honored to be part of a team of people who value music that way.
yeah. So much of the early Blue Note records, like from the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of artists that were doing songs from the Great America Songbook.
Yeah,
Do you ever revisit that music? Have you,
that's my favorite, Doug. I mean, that's yeah, and
as
I've
far as
been
playing it, do you ever play that stuff?
absolutely. It's funny. It's not on record as much as it is live. I feel like live is where that comes out. And with a few exceptions, it's a lot of original music on the records I make. However, I've been wanting to do standards record for so long, and um, so it's because it's what I love playing. It's what I want to play. And so you're absolutely right. That would be uh, in keeping with the tradition and of Blue Note and just jazz, frankly. It's just critical that it's played with reverence, but not a what is it? Anachrist? What is it? What am I trying to say? Um, oh, I can't think of the word. Like, I can't be throwbacky.
Mhm.
Anachronistic, that's the word. It can't be like Civil War reenactment. You know what I mean? It's still got to be modern. So that's the excitement is how do you approach this music and approach it from modern day? And so I look forward to that.
Yeah. Will your Speak to Me tour be coming to California?
I believe so, but I don't know when that leg will happen. I think it's going to be uh probably in the fall, if not the spring. We were just at SF Jazz for a residency in San Francisco, and we performed the Speak to Me album from front to back. It was a beautiful show with all the original cast members from the record. But no, I'm looking forward to our next visit to my home.
Let me ask you one last question. Uh, we change roles, and you're working in a record store, and I'm a kid that's interested in jazz.
Yeah.
Record, I got money to buy one record. What do you sell me?
Oh, that's so great. Well, I can think of about 1,000, but the one that got me hooked, I'll tell you, I recommend this to the young person, is Jim Hall and Bill Evans' Undercurrent. And what's so special, there's a million things that are special about this record, but it's not a big ensemble. It's duet, it's guitar and piano. But the blurriness between what's the written composition, what's the improvisation, what's predetermined, what's just conversational between the two players, to me remains one of the greatest examples of why the music is so cool because you hear the humanity of two people talking, musically speaking. And itself is sounds great. And it bears repeated listening. So that's my pick
Okay,
today.
that's good. I'm going to go buy it when I.
Yeah, go enjoy it.
Julian, great talking to you.
Man, great talking anytime. It's been far too many years, and I hope to see you real soon.
Let's
Thanks
do
for
it.
taking the time.
And good luck. The record is great. It's Speak to Me. It's on the Blue Note record label, and it's on a beautiful double vinyl. I recommend it to everybody. Thanks again. Safe
Thanks,
travel.
brother. Much love. See you soon.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
Oh, sweet.